So we have. Hello, looking at the clock and looking at it's just past 6, I will call this meeting to order. I will now call to order the City of Newburgh Budget Committee, meeting of May 3rd. Nope, April 30th, 2023, 24. Hey, Katie, you were, seriously, like, I have a script. Anyhow, sorry about that. So I will call the April 30th, 2024 meeting to order. Rachel, will you please conduct a roll call?
Yes. Raquel Peregrino de Brito.
Here.
Shelly Reimer is on Zoom.
Here.
Judy Brown.
Here.
Ned Knight.
Here.
Alex Nichols.
Here.
Ted Iborra.
Here.
Steph St. Cyr.
Here.
Bill Rosacker.
Here.
Elise Yarnell Holloman.
Here.
Peggy Kilberg.
Here.
Molly Olson.
Here.
Robin Wheatley.
Here.
Mike McBride.
Here.
And let's see if Derek is now on Zoom. Derek is on Zoom and I'll let him in right now. All present.
Excellent. So we now go to the public comment section. I will now open the floor to public comment. Rachel, did we receive any public comments?
You have the one public comment.
All right. I have here someone who wishes to speak on item number 4. It's Mike Fisher. Please come and make sure you turn on the mic.
Hello, my name is Mike Fisher. I am not a resident of the city of Newburgh, but rather an employee of the city of Newburgh. I'm president of Local 1569, representing Public Works Maintenance, Operations, IT, and Engineering. So one quick statement to make. I'm here to stress the importance of our cost of living adjustment. In the past few years, as you all know, we've experienced unprecedented inflation, and our bargain COLA simply haven't kept up. As our negotiations continue with the city, I want everyone to know that each and every percent makes a difference. There's more and more members getting second jobs in the evenings and on the weekends to supplement their earnings because of the increased cost of living. Lunchtime conversations are often about everyday items and the unreasonable costs that everyone is having to pay. I believe we have a great team here at Newburgh, and we have often, along with other city staff, been called the best in the state, and most recently, the best in the world. And these are incredible compliments. And I believe that a fair wage that keeps up with inflation will help retain such an incredible staff and perhaps draw new employees to the city. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you for your comment. Okay, moving on to the next item of the agenda. It is conducting election of officers first. I will take, next item is conducting election of officers. Oh, I'm sorry. Can we do the Pledge of Allegiance first? Yes, why not? My apologies for that. Now keeping on here. We'll go to the election of officers. First, I'll take nominations for chair.
I'd like to nominate Raquel to have the awesome opportunity to be chair again. One more time anyway.
And I second that. Any other nominations?
I would like to nominate Stephanie St. Cyr.
Second?
I'll second that.
Okay. Okay. So I guess we go for a vote, right? Okay,
So we have a little bit of.
yeah, you can have please have some discussion.
Do both of you want to? I am happy to let Raquel continue on and I can learn from her greatness and then possibly in the future step in. But I'm happy to fill whatever is needed, but I would like to also recognize that she's already had experience.
Then I'll withdraw my second.
I call for the vote. Okay, if no further discussions,
Can I?
yes, go ahead.
I just want to say, I think you have done a wonderful job. It's not a reflection on the job you've done. I know that Stephanie has been on this committee for 3 years. I think that's probably one other person has, and anyway, I would like to give people opportunity, but I'm not passionate either way.
None taken. So all those in favor of nominating Raquel for Chair of the Budget Committee? Raquel Peregrino de Brito. Okay. That's okay. Say aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none? Let's go ahead. And we should now take nominations for Vice Chair.
Okay.
Do we have a nomination for Vice Chair?
I would like to nominate Stephanie Santier for vice chair.
I'll second that.
Any discussions? Or any other? Okay, if no discussions, let's go ahead and take a vote for all in favor of Stephanie for Vice Chair. Everybody say yes, if you are in favor.
Yes.
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 Any opposition? Okay, then, so Stephanie will be our vice chair. Thank you. Okay, moving forward here. We will, now that the officers have been defined, we'll go ahead and give it to Katie for her budget overview. On to overview of budget and general changes, where we have a number of items to cover tonight. I'll now turn to you, Katie Strode.
Thank you so much. So at this time, Will's going to read into the record the budget message.
Thank you, Katie, and thank you for everything that you did to build this thing in the first place. It's my pleasure to report that the City of Newburgh continues to operate a fiscally conservative budget, free from deficit risks, structural or otherwise, which, as you know, was not the case just a few years ago. The common good of our town is guided by an incredibly effective council administration team, as well as solidifying a great new relationship with our school district partners via the addition of an extra SRO, with school-assisted funding to make that happen. We have initiated our goal of debt reduction in line with a fresh and ambitious set of new council goals. The city launched its effort to attempt to expand its urban growth boundary, also another one of our council goals. Stability and careful fiscal stewardship, a no-frills form of governance, remains the city's objective in this new fiscal year. And of course, this is in line with what our voters wanted. While the city achieved the status of Oregon's only fully staffed city in 2024, no additional staffing is being added to this particular budget. After 2 years of very focused work, the city is now a fully modern digital workplace with accounts payable, payroll, and intranet services all on digital platforms. I promise you that our neighbours look upon our budget ledger, public services, and public safety with envy. Innovation in the area of customer service and transparency included new customer service standards, a new staff handbook, and a new city council meeting process, and that makes participation in city government an easy and pleasant experience for everybody who'd like to take part. This has resulted in simplified public comment sign-ups and a considerable reduction in public complaints about permit turnaround times and similar items. I'm extremely proud to announce, and by the way, when I say this, I'm not speaking just for myself. I'm speaking on behalf of the entire staff when I say this. I am extremely proud to announce that on top of our said core award of 2022, we received the 2024 City County Insurance Statewide Award for Innovation. Only one city wins that award each year. And it is a testament to the incredible hard work of our staff that our STRIVE values caused us to be selected for this award. The general fund and other primary funds have benefited this year from a longer lens of a 3-year budget model. For the first time, this analysis has been conducted for many years. The 3-year model will be in effect from now on. While we are conducting a policy of tight fiscal controls to include no additional staffing, we are predicting stable ending fund balances throughout the 3-year cycle, despite inflationary headwinds. Sadly, at the time of writing, the city continues to struggle with the aftermath of the freeze floods that severely damaged City Hall. I am glad to report the staff are undaunted by the challenges that this imposed. In part, thanks to the philosophy embedded in our new emergency operations plan, city services were restored in just 6 days, and our team continues to perform at a high level despite being displaced to different physical locations. I'm very proud of the fact that some of my public work staff are here this evening, and I'd like to thank them again, as I have in the past, for the work that they did on that particular day when the flood happened, getting the equipment out of the water and saving tens of thousands of dollars, which could have been lost otherwise. And I appreciate you. In 2023 and 2024, almost all of the internal reforms of the city's administrative practices and software that began in 2022 were completed. That includes new accounts payable and court software, a new emergency operations plan, the new staff handbook, and many other items. Remaining items, a new website in line with our new customer service standard, will be completed before the end of this financial year. As described already, during fiscal year 23-24, a new and ambitious set of council goals were created and published by Newburgh's hard-working council. One of these led to the creation of a sinking fund. This is a contingency fund that will begin the process of reducing our debt over time. Using this mechanism, the budget has a set aside based on new revenue, aiming to retire our communication tower debt early with an objective of August of 26. This key concept of trying to limit our debt is unique in Western Oregon. While other cities are working hard to add new fees that will impact the residents, we are going in the opposite direction, and we are trying to reduce our debt so as to be able to control charges. We hope to reduce these for the benefit of all of our residents, and that's something that I'm sure all of us can get behind, since our daily work is focused on making the residents' lives better. This is truly a great place to grow, so everybody please continue to be mighty. Thank you.
All right. So I'll start on the general fund. So if we start with the resources, that's page 13 of the budget. There we go. So I wanted to go over some of the variations on the revenues here. So a lot of this we kind of covered on the last meeting where we talked about some of the metrics we used in the forecast and a lot of those are applying for this budget, but I wanted just to kind of go over some of those again, just in case you were still looking at that. So beginning fund balance, so that one had a slight increase, but we're not expecting it to be too much of an increase from last year. We're just kind of expected to be about the same as where we were. And actually with the adopted budget column there, that, just for clarification, that's what we adopted this time last year. So since then, we've had a supplemental budget and we'll probably have one more supplemental budget. So those changes haven't reflected there, just for awareness. The current year taxes. So we took a little bit more of a conservative estimate here. So we did include the 3% allowed by charter, which we'll talk about probably more at the last meeting. But some of our justification for that is since all of our new revenue is going towards debt reduction, this is pretty crucial to our continuing operation, is to having that extra 3% on the taxes. And then looking at some of the properties that are coming on the tax roll and what we're expecting for next year, we took a more conservative between 2 to 3% based on what we've been receiving this year on top of that for our estimate for next year. It could be more, it could be less. Sometimes it's hard to know with builders what we're actually gonna be receiving. Another big one for the changes are franchise fees. So a lot of those increase about 5% every year based on our agreements with these vendors. Sometimes their usage can vary. So that's why you can see kind of a fluctuation based on some of our numbers there. So we're trying to look at what we're actually receiving this year and then basing that estimated number for next year. The local marijuana tax, that one we're expecting to decrease because, I mean, as most of you know, Oregon is pretty generous with growing and how much we allow people to grow at home. So people just aren't going to the local marijuana stores and buying. So our revenues from that are just continuing to dwindle over time on that. The community development. So that is our planning revenue that we get from planning permits. So with that, we've kind of looked at what we received this year, and that's what we budgeted for next year. We're expecting a little bit of a decline with planning and throughout the city. So we're expecting it to be probably pretty similar to what we've been doing this year in regards to planning permits issued. So that's the number that we've based that on. State shared revenue is a big one there. So that will be the state liquor taxes, the cigarette, the marijuana, and the state shared revenue. So the state liquor tax and the state shared revenue, those are both liquor. And we expect those to increase about 5% based on the state's estimate. And then the cigarette and marijuana taxes are pretty flat because people are just not buying cigarettes and not buying marijuana at the stores. So we're just expecting those to be probably pretty flat next year. City contracts. So that used to be our Dundee planning contract that we had. We ended up canceling that this year just due to our staffing wasn't able to accommodate Dundee's planning anymore. So that won't be a revenue that you'll see anymore on the budget.
Katie, can I make a comment?
Yeah, of course.
And another factor on that one is that we actually were losing a small portion for every hour of work we did for Dundee because what they were charging across their desk wasn't enough to cover our expenses and they didn't have an appetite to increase that, so.
Exactly. And then the Dundee Communications and Police contract, that's for our police and dispatch services we provide the city of Dundee. And by our contract with them, that goes up 5% every year. The park SDC fee, we have just a really slight increase for that. That's our administrative fee that we receive to give the SDCs for CPRD that we collect and distribute for them. So we have just a small fee that we take on top of that. Yeah, if only we could. But yeah, so we're based on our actuals on that. We just bumped that number up a little bit. The school district SRO. So that number in there jumped because that's a reflection of our new contract that we have with Newburgh School District. And so that's the fixed amount that we have in the contract for next year. You'll see forensic services, we did a little bit of an increase there. A lot of that is based on actual revenue that we've received. So a lot of that is us, we have a contract with City of McMinnville, and then we do forensic work that we contract out with Yamhill County Sheriff's Office. And we receive revenue for that from our forensic team within the police department. The CCRLS reimbursement, that had a huge jump, which either Will can explain or we can let Corey explain, because it's all a great thing. Yeah. Yeah, why not?
Sure, I'm happy to talk about that. So each year we get a reimbursement from CCRLS, which is the Chemeketa Cooperative Regional Library Service. And that reimbursement is based on the number of checkouts to library patrons outside of our library area. So this was shocking to everyone, frankly, because we had a 49% increase. So it was huge. Last year, the reimbursement was 107,738, and this year it's 160,571. So it was a very large increase, and I think there's a lot of things behind that increase. One of the things I think is I have a really fantastic staff who do a great job at collection development and buying the things that people want to read. So kudos to my staff for that.
Well, I'm going to add to that. So the reality is that Corey is circulating 10% better than I did. She is kicking arse. And so that's why our share of overall circulation is so much better. And whatever, it may be a big team effort, but this is a leader who's doing great things.
We just have to highlight that one because as you can see, most of our revenues are between 3 and 5% increase every year. And that was a huge jump. So that was really unexpected and we were happy to see that. The next line item, we had traffic fines. We actually had a little bit of a decrease here, mostly because whatever I was budgeting every year, they just weren't hitting with the citation. So we put it to more of what we've actually been receiving for citation revenue on that line item. Then we have a new line item on here, the photo red light, which I talked about the last meeting, but this is for the traffic cameras that are going into effect next year. We have a slightly conservative number here just because we're not sure what to expect on the cameras and how many citations they're going to issue. And also with that, we have a slight increase on the traffic school fee because with more citations issuing, that means more people eligible for traffic school. So we expect both of those line items to go up. Interest earned was another one that increased a lot. So we've kind of been under budgeting this one. Over the past year and a half or so, the LGIP, the local government investment pool, which we have a significant amount of our money in, that's earning, I think, 4.5% or a little bit more than that. So it's had really good returns for our revenue that's in there. So we've put the interest on there more to what we've actually received this year. So we're hoping that interest will stay up for a little while. There's one good side to having high interest, and that's you earn some money on it. And then the sale of assets, that was also another one for debt reduction. So we have a property that we're hoping to sell this year. And so we've budgeted in there a dollar amount that we're hoping to get for that property. And then, of course, we always have some vehicles that we sell throughout the year. That's also earmarked in there. But the property sale in there is for the debt reduction piece. And that's that increase. Yeah.
I think an important thing just to register with everybody is, as you all know, the city budget is kind of a budget in two halves. There's a rates powered piece, and then there's the sort of general fund powered piece. Well, the general fund powered piece has recognized several new income streams that are coming on board. And so that has helped us keep up with the headwinds of inflation and COLA that staff that are paid for out of the general fund are actually facing. So fortuitously, these are coming on stream at the same time as we face some of these really strong headwinds.
Yeah, that's a good point. And then the other big one, if you scroll down a little bit on the next page, on page 14, is the TLT, the transfer in from the transient lodging tax. That revenue has just continued to go up and up and up, which is great for us, which means tourism is up here. So we've put that to what we expect to be next year. It's we've been receiving a lot more than what we've thought this year even. So we've put kind of what we expect to receive next year in that line as well. And that is mostly it for the revenues. Do we have any questions specifically on general fund revenues?
I have a question
Yeah.
on the property that you're selling. In this market that's relatively slow, is that something you can count on in the budget?
Yeah, Will's gonna take this one.
Actually, the reason why this is on the budget is because somebody approached the city with an offer.
Oh,
And the city council is still weighing up its options with regard to that offer. So I have to be a little nebulous about this right now. But if it is declared soon, then the city will learn more about that. But obviously that we have to put the number in now as a possibility. Otherwise we'd have to supplemental budget, do it later. But yes, it's based upon an actual offer.
okay. Thank you.
Yeah,
Does this offer, if by just taking an offer, is that a possibility that you could be getting less than what you might get if it went to market?
Yes, indeed. And that's why once the offer is formally recognized, which is coming to a council session near you soon, then they will enter a period of advertising to see if any higher offer can come in. Because obviously we would want, unless it was a nuclear radiation dump, which we wouldn't take. We would want to take the best offer that would bring in the best revenue. So yes.
Can I ask if it's a piece of land or does it include?
Okay, so we've had an offer for the Butler property, which is the piece of vacant land next to the post office. The city has tried in the past to sell it with no success. And we think the dollar amount it will realize will be this amount or better.
yeah, Bill?
Hi, Katie. I know that we have bought and sold some vehicles this year. Remember there was a loader. Recently, we just did another one, which probably hasn't been sold yet. Where does that money show up on the budget?
The sale of assets.
Is it on here?
Yep,
Well, then shouldn't we have a figure for this year, or do we? 45.
yeah, that's what the 54,000 is what we actually received in 2023 for sale of assets for like the vehicles. And some of those can also be, if the vehicle's related to like the street fund, you'll see that in the street fund, not necessarily the general fund. Yeah, but that's generally where we budget vehicle sales.
And of course, if the suggested budget number was beaten by selling several vehicles, if it became a substantial shift, we would do a supplemental budget to recognize it.
All right, while we're on this page, I'll just talk quickly about the transfers and the reserves before we move into the departmental budgets. The general fund has one transfer out and it goes to the debt service fund. And this is for the communication tower debt that we pay for, which this is part of the debt that we are hoping to pay off early as part of the debt reduction plan. So you'll see this other side of it in Fund 9 when we get to that. And then for the reserves, Our general contingency, we have at 2.1 million budgeted, which is good. We would like to keep that above 2 million if possible. That's just our best practice, and you always want to keep a reserve in the general fund. Yes, the buffer, exactly. These other contingencies are assigned for specific departments. This first one on here is for the police, which this is part of their capital rollover money that they have been saving and rolling over. And so this is part of what they have a plan for, that they're saving for future purchases. And then the other ones on here are for court, and there's a small amount for library. And then that very last one on here is that sinking fund that we're saving for the debt reduction. So at the end of this fiscal year, we're anticipating that to be a little over $1 million based on the cameras and the SRO contract and the sale of the property. Yeah. All right, we'll move on to general government. And then can you go to page 16? Perfect, yep. So for this one, this is the counselor's budget. And there were minimal changes made to this one. One of the changes was to dues and meetings. We had an increase here for actual costs that we have that have increased for membership dues associated with League of Oregon Cities and the Mid-Willamette Valley COG. So we had to increase that budget just slightly to pay for those membership dues. The mayor's expense, we increased a little bit just because we've had additional expenses that we like to book there. Community support. This one had a little bit of a jump, and that's because we're expecting our sister city, Hoysdorf, to come visit early next fiscal year. So we wanted to set aside a little bit of a budget for entertaining our sister city when they come. And then transit services, we increased that just slightly to what we're actually paying Yamhill County for the transit services. And those are all the changes we made to general government. Does anybody have any questions on those?
I feel like I ask this question every time, so sorry, but is the transit increase based on a percentage increase across all the cities recommended by the Mid-Willamette?
Usually the transit service just asks us what we can pay. I mean, I think last year they had asked, they asked for a lot more and the budget was already done. And I think this year they just asked for the same amount. So I think, I'm not quite sure how that works, to be honest. Okay,
The county picks up about approximately 80% of the cost of that service. And then they seek approximately 20% from all the cities that are served by that. So when they see an incremental increase based upon their fuel costs or COLA, they come back to the cities and ratchet it up a tiny bit.
all right, we'll move on to municipal court then. And that's page 18. And court also had very slight increases on their materials and services. So printing and advertising was one they decreased to accommodate some of their other increases that they're having in the budget. Bank fees was one. So this one you're going to see across all of the departments, especially with utility billing when we get to that. But ever since COVID, we've seen a huge increase in the number of people who want to pay with credit cards, or they want to have automatic payment from their checking account, so that all of those have bank fees associated with them. So we're just seeing more and more people just want to call and pay with a credit card. So all of our fees have gone up significantly over the last couple of years. So we had to increase this to more of our actual costs of what we're actually paying for bank fees. It's something that maybe we should look into, something that maybe should be brought to council about maybe looking into about the fee structure, but it's, you know, a council decision for another time. But for now, these are the fees, convenient fees that we're paying for accepting credit cards and automatic payments for people. Court-appointed fees, this one just slightly increased a little bit. These are when we have to have attorneys that come in that are on our dime. And then the court and prosecutor expenses, these are for our Spanish translator and interpreter that comes to court. And so we've just had a little bit more need for that more recently, so we've increased the budget just slightly for that. And I believe those are all the changes for court. Do we have any questions on that?
So I've got a question on the, so we're increasing, we're projecting a $250,000 photo red light revenue stream. Wouldn't that increase the workload for municipal court?
Yes, and that was part of this current fiscal year. It used to be a part-time, we used to have 1.5 court people.
Yeah.
And then during this fiscal year, we reduced the city manager's admin assistant and we split it into 2 positions. So we took the part-time court clerk and made it full-time. And then we took the records clerical assistant and made that part-time a full-time.
Okay.
So yes, we did have 2 full-time employees now because of the expected increase in citations.
But we did it in a revenue neutral way.
Yes,
Yeah, I'm like looking at it, I'm like, where's the increase here? I don't see it. But I mean,
That's because it's already in the budget.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
okay.
Katie, I had a
Yeah,
request, not tonight, but can you bring to us the total, for the bank fee that, because I know it's in a lot of places, but
I think I know most of it because I looked at this before. Last year, we paid approximately 379,000 in bank fees. Yeah, it's significant. Yeah. Yeah. Bank fees. Yeah. Yes.
So how often do we check around to see if we can get a better?
We
fee
just
for
did.
the-
Yeah, we just did last
But
year.
is it like annual? Is it every 2 years or?
I'm not sure what they did before, but that was something that we did when we moved to the new system. So because of the volume that we do for utility billing, we have actually a really low rate for that. I think it's around 2% on the bank fee, which is actually pretty low for a credit card fee. I think the court fee is a little bit higher because it's not quite the volume, but it's something that we're continuing to look around on because the fees are a lot.
One more follow-up. So, I'm assuming that all the fees, they're all being run through one bank or one system, so it's not being split up. Okay.
Yeah. Yep, we have a couple different banks that we use. We have like Chase and then we have, I can't remember, Bluefin, I think is the other one. So yeah, we have a couple different ones that we're trying to use to get the best rates based on the volume that we do. Yeah.
And just another comment or question. So the rationale is that if the council, or if there was a decision to pass that on to the customer who's paying the bill, that would potentially discourage to make that payment, right? So you have to pay $100 plus $2 for convenience fee. We want to make sure that we're always getting that revenue, and passing that on could cause an issue, right? So that's something that to be discussed how in the city council to see what's best for the city.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a good point because we have a tough time collecting revenue from, utility billing customers have a tough time paying sometimes. So it's, we want to make however they can pay the best way without tacking on more fees to them. So just food for thought.
I mean, it's really tough because obviously we want to do the best deal we can for our residents and not have anybody who's struggling pay more money, which is kind of the story of the whole budget in some ways. But, you'd have to pass it on if we added a fee.
Yeah. And we literally pay a fee for anything that's not cash. So anytime we have checks, there's a small fee. There's a bigger fee if you do an auto pay. There's a bigger fee for ACH payments, then credit cards, I think, have the highest fee. So it just all depends on the transaction. So, I mean, the few amount of people who actually come in and pay something in cash is, far and few between nowadays. So it's just almost a cost of business. All right.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. We'll move on to police then. Page 23.
Hello, I'm Captain Ferguson with the Newburgh Dundee Police Department. So I'll handle the patrol section of increases that we asked for from the city. We were asked to keep our budget pretty much the same as the previous year. There was just a few budget lines that we had to change or need to change because of just the cost of everything going up. So I think you'll find that we did a pretty good job at keeping this pretty minimal. Our training budget's been the same for the last 12 years. So we're asking for an increase in the training from $15,000 to $25,000.
This is on page 24. Sorry.
We pay a dog control fee, which is $10,000, and that basically assures us 2 kennels at the Newburgh Animal Shelter. They've been charging us $25 since they took over the shelter. They're charging everyone else $90, so they had to increase their fees. So they doubled it from 25 to 50, which is still a great deal for us. And then our body worn cameras. So as most of you know, 3 years ago, we went with body worn cameras. With the system that we're gone with, it also now includes drones and 2 dash cams for our traffic cars. So we're asking for an increase in body worn cameras from $83,000 to $105,000 for upkeep and maintenance.
I'll make one comment here because it says 0 on that adopted budget, and that was a correction that we made on the supplemental budget because that was inadvertently left off the budget last year. So just so you know, it is accounted for this year.
And those are the 3 that patrol is asking for from the police department. And then Captain Simmons is gonna have a few more.
Yes, hi, Captain Simmons, Newburgh Police. So got a few things. Forensic services that was talked about a little earlier by Katie. There's an increase in that. That's a revenue account. With our digital forensic lab, we actually make money from that. We get $20,000 from McMinnville PD to utilize that lab. And that was increased $8,000 because of revenue from the Yamhill County Sheriff's Office. They've chosen to pay us hourly for our services. McMinnville just gives us the flat rate of $20,000 a year. So that income is just strictly on revenue, nothing more. In our dispatch center, similar to patrol, the costs for travel and training have gone up, even for online training. So, yeah, police communications. Sorry.
That's page 30.
Sorry.
Make sure they're on the same page. Now you can go. Sorry.
So travel and training in the dispatch center also has stayed the same for many years. And those costs have gone up just like everything else. So we requested that to go from 7,500 to 10,000. And then also on dispatch, our contractual services, just a few increases there. Those are all related to those dollar amounts just increasing. The costs have gone up, like our central squares, our report writing system, that went up 7%. Our WACA radio fees, the portion that we pay, Public Works has a very small portion of that for the radios they have. But that has also increased this year by a small amount. Yeah, so the total on that's 132,581 and it was 128,928. So very small percentage. And then also our equipment repair and maintenance. We actually decreased that by 3,000. We were going to do a project cleaning up all the old radio tower antenna stuff that was on the building. Since we've gone to the new digital system, we just had all this cabling and wired, all this stuff in there that needed to be removed. We didn't get to that project, and we're not going to during this budget. So we've just asked for a decrease in that, so we're giving that back. So that went from 10,000 to 7,000. That's it.
Do you guys have any questions on, so we covered all of the police budget and then we covered communications as well. Oh, Mike.
So two questions on the forensic category. Do we have the capacity to be able to take on more work in that area? And if so, have we thought about trying to market ourselves to other cities in the state? Or would it be too far away and unrealistic to do?
Both. I mean, we have had contracts with Tiger. I can't think of it. There's been at least another agent, like
Carl-
Beaverton.
Carlton,
Or
you
actually,
know.
yeah, that's true. We do things for Carlton. We receive grants for other work that we do, related to child offenses. So there is other sources of revenue for that account, for forensic services. So we only have one person in there and unfortunately he's pretty maxed out. And it takes, his training is a decade in the making. So it's to get somebody up to speed who can assist him. We have an idea for a digital forensic team. And we've already started that with just taking patrol officers and maybe some detectives and going to some lower level training so they can assist with like cell phones and processing things like that. And, that's just the cost of sending them to that training, really. It's just going to supplement his work, but we really can't take on any more contracts, unfortunately. It's just, he's too buried. Most, as you know, I know it's been discussed previously, but a lot of the crimes we're investigating involve cell phones now more than computers. So it's not even a computer thing, it's just cell phones. So.
Pardon the interruption. We've had a request from our Zoom participants to speak closer into the mics and a little louder if possible from everyone.
When can we increase the charge to MAC?
I don't think we're there. Honestly, the workload, these other agencies have their own Cellebrites too, which are the capability to get into phones. They just don't have the training in it. So they are doing some of their own stuff as well. So, that's something we can discuss for sure.
And I also, over the last 3 years, we've doubled. So it started out at 10,000 and now I believe it's $20,000 that MAC pays us in just 3 years.
That's a good question.
I've got a couple of questions. On the holiday bank, why did it go up more than twice for that one?
Oh, they're giving that to me.
It's 2110 for police administration, page 23.
So that was a part of our tentative agreement we made with the association.
Also, it's an agreement.
Yeah, so they have the holiday bank. So part of the city has holidays that we get differently. So because they're a 24/7 operation, they don't get the same holidays that we do. So they receive it in a holiday bank where they can take it different days because a lot of them have to potentially work on a city holiday. So it had an increase this year because of our tentative agreement with the association. They had not had 4 holidays that were in there. And so we added those holidays in there because we were trying to clean up how we do payroll because it was a payroll nightmare to have the holiday worked and then the holiday pay. And So, right. You want to add something
There,
else?
there were new federal holidays as well. that had to
Allison's
be.
going to add to that.
Hi, I was just going to say it's simply like holidays like Thanksgiving and Christmas that the police used to take differently, that it, for payroll reasons, we've added to the holiday bank.
Yes, that was a much simpler way to explain it.
How about the internal charge admin support? Went from 1,400,000 to 2,000,000.
Yeah, so that is part of our Fund 31. So Fund 31 is our administrative services fund. So that is where we pay for the city manager, finance, IT, HR, city recorder, community engagement, fleet and facilities. And so all of the funds pay into that administrative services fee. And so we have a whole spreadsheet that we do based on,
Cross allocation.
yeah, cost allocation, exactly. And so it went up based on just cost of personnel and cost of materials and services that it went up.
And then the $330,000 capital outlay, is that for new vehicles?
So the capital outlay, our capital outlay that we have, basically our rollover accounts are going towards vehicles, body worn cameras, forensics, MDT replacement, radio replacement.
Okay.
So we have to save up. One example, just so to answer that, over the next 2 years, you're gonna see this get larger and larger. The radios we carry are $8,000 a piece, and we have 75 of them to replace. Average life of a radio is about 10 years according to Motorola. So we're gonna have to get that account pretty big, because come around 2030, we're gonna be spending well over $500,000 on radios. So that's why you're gonna see that continue to rise. We're not just banking money to bank it. It's when these radios start to go out, they get very costly.
Okay.
Yeah, and so from this, whatever they don't spend from this 330,000, which they're not planning on spending all of that.
It goes to the next budget cycle.
Yes, and then that goes into that contingency that we saw on page 14 that was assigned to police capital. So that number will continue to grow so that they can save to spend for these big purchases that they have.
And so this was actually an innovation that we started last cycle, which was the capital rollover, saving for capital equipment rather than deliberately creating crises every 4 or 5 years.
And then on the page 24 on the uniforms, our actuals are $45,000 in 23, but you only budgeted 35. I'm guessing uniforms aren't going down, is it?
Well, we've been pretty consistently 4 or 5 officers down. We're totally full now. So the big part of uniforms gets spent on onboarding. When you buy a vest for, $2,000, a helmet, these kind of things, it can be anywhere from $5,000 to $7,000 to onboard.
Yeah.
So with us being full, the uniform, we're not expecting to spend as much in uniforms moving
Think you're
forward.
fully staffed.
Yes, sir.
And that's the same thing with the recruitment.
Correct.
Okay.
On the mic.
Only fully staffed police department in Oregon.
We hope so. Yeah, we hope no one quits.
That's all I had. Thanks.
Thank you. Awesome, good job.
Get one of those.
All right, we'll move on to library, which is page 33.
Good evening. I'm Corey Burkle, the library director, and I just have a very few things. I don't have a whole lot for you tonight because we've had very minimal changes. So we are increasing utilities this year by a little over $6,000. That's because utilities have increased, which I think you all know. Really, my big news was the Chemeketa Cooperative Regional Library Services, which we've already talked about. So
Yes.
excited about that.
News.
So what we're paying out for that really is the 33,953 as opposed to the 74,100 we did last year. So very excited about that. My capital outlay is actually down 4,000 this year because we did our big camera project last year, and that was very successful. So this year I'm asking for 14,000 instead of 18,000. So that's really all I have for the O1 accounts. Are there any questions for me?
Can you speak to what you're going to do with the capital outlay?
Yes, absolutely. So capital outlay ongoing is replacement costs for laptops and staff computers, but we also have the public computers as well. So it's a lot of computers. We also have a very old projector and in our library meeting room. And that's where we have people can rent or we don't charge for it. So they can reserve our meeting room. And it's also for library board meetings and other meetings as well. We'll be getting a hopefully webcam and also microphone for the meeting room as well. And probably the biggest thing we're going to be doing is updating our public Wi-Fi. So that's quite old, and we've been in talks with IT for a couple of years about needing to update that as well. So that would be what our capital outlay will be going for this year. All right, thank you.
Right. Thanks, Corey. All right, we'll move on to planning. And that's page 37. Here we go.
Good evening, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Scott Siegel. I'm your Community Development Director. We have a very brief few points here to update you on. This is a lean budget. Personnel has actually gone down. We have 5 FTE in planning on the planning side of the House of Community Development. And previously, from what I understand, the city had a housing planner. We don't have that position anymore. I should mention that planning provides economic development and housing related services in addition to development review and permitting. And economic development and housing do not have dedicated staff. So when you get to that part of the budget, you won't see any FTE. It's that group of planning personnel who deliver all of those services. The increases that you see here are primarily, you'll see under travel and training. We have an increase there, and that is largely due to being fully staffed up. We have 2 certified planners, including myself and our planning manager, Clay Downing. We have certification maintenance requirements for that. And we do have junior planners who are training for their certification, so we've budgeted for that as well. We're also showing the increase in bank fees that you've seen elsewhere. There is a slight increase in what's called maintenance agreements. And that is where we have developers who've provided deposits as an assurance to perform on their projects. And when those deposits are refunded, I believe those are the maintenance agreements that we return. And our planning manager is here if you have questions about that. Finally, the largest item here, it's not an increase, but it's a continuation of professional services. We've budgeted for consulting services to assist the Planning Commission staff and the council on our urban growth boundary initiatives. These are council goals and priorities. The same level of funding that was budgeted last year, we propose to carry forward this year. It's a multi-year, multi-phased process. So you'll see professional services budgeted over the next couple of years as well in order to deliver this work. And the process itself has a number of decision points and off ramps so that the council can decide where it would like to allocate resources. And so this is really a all-in budget for professional services and planning. And that concludes my presentation. If you have any questions.
I have a question. So I read the write-up where it says, under significant changes, we eliminated the Dundee contract, termination of Dundee contract for planning services. Wouldn't that decrease the workload, which in turn should decrease the salaries and wages of the budget?
Oh, that's a good question. Committee member, it does not reduce personnel, and that the personnel who are providing those services were the same personnel that we have that need to deliver services to the city of Newburgh. And in fact, the level of service, as I think you may have heard, was diminished for the city, the citizens of Newburgh, in part because we were trying to provide services to another community. So I see this as allowing us to provide the level of service that Newburgh expects from community development by not being spread so thin.
Scott, that contract was around 30,000, I
That
think,
sounds about right.
something like that.
Yeah. And
So you wouldn't, it would be a portion of a person, you wouldn't be able to go down a portion of a person anyway, so.
yeah, that's right, Counselor Olson. It wouldn't even allow us to bring someone from 1.0 to 0.5 FTE. It was nominal, and it was spread across a number of personnel. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And I believe that's everybody from the general fund. Do we have any questions on anything we've seen on the general fund? All right. Yeah, of course.
One that I should know that I feel like I attempt to ask every year, but what is the process, city manager worthy, just for public's understanding of how our incredible staff go through year over year increases for merit, performance, cost of living, and are we advocating enough for them, given inflation and how difficult it is to live right now?
Thank you for asking this question. First of all, just to set the scene, the conversation around cost of living increases and other increases doesn't begin with how much can we hide away or how much can we save, or the conversation begins with, based upon our other demands on what the city has to do, how much can we afford to give people in COLAs and other benefits such that we can have this amazing situation where we're fully staffed. And that conversation is continuous and ongoing. And in fact, earlier in my career here as a city manager, when I found myself with the ability to cut the assistant city manager position, which was at that time being recruited for, I utilized that money to enable every staff member's full insurance pickup to be paid for by the city, including for family members. So that's always the place where we begin. So yes, the conversation around benefits and COLAs begins with what we can afford to pay. In other words, we don't like to play games with people. We have a reasonable idea of what we can afford to pay. And when we come to the bargaining table, we do it having looked at a 3-year model, including the other pressures that are on the city for things we have to do for the residents, and looking at our ending fund balance. And for this year, for the first time, we can say that for 3 years in a row, which we've already done. So that's the honest and open-handed approach. I don't like to play games. The second part of your question is about how we do this process. And we do this process by something that I brought in 2022 called the Budget Change Document Process, the BCR, Budget Change Request. Every year, we discuss with all of the departments what the council priorities are, and we ask them to look at their budget requests through that lens and to write BCRs for anything that they feel they must increase. And notice I say must increase. So for materials and services, we always try to keep the lid on it as much as possible. When they fill out the BCRs, for each line item that you're looking at tonight, a senior staff member or their team has filled out a BCR to request a change, and they have justified why that change has to happen. And then we meet with the departments, go through the BCRs, dispute sometimes with them, bit of push and pull, and then we finally end up with the final numbers that become part of this budget. But that's separate completely from the COLA process. The COLA process goes the other way. We look at what we can afford within labor to try to retain people and give people the best deal that we can so we can stay fully staffed, unlike our neighboring cities. Yep.
Sorry, I also wanted to say that we often do market compensation analysis. And of course, we have done a class and compensation study, which I'll speak about when I get to my budget. And we provide that data when we're negotiating our collective bargaining agreements to show people what same job is paying in local communities. This year, we even looked at Beaverton, which is really more than double our size, but because it's so close, we often hear we could go work in Beaverton. We wanted to see how that looked too, but we are, for the team that is here, we are ahead of the game, and for the police, we're somewhat in the middle.
But we want to keep our people and we care about them, and that's very important. So it's not, you know, nobody here is looking to keep money aside or keep anything hidden. We're trying to do the best deal we can do for our people, because frankly, it's for the sake of the workers here, which caused me to move into this job in the first place, because this isn't my career and it's not my first love. And that's why I'm in this job.
One more follow on. Have we ever considered, you know, in my industry, it's like if you're under this compensation level, if there's X amount to, you know, your ending fund balance or your NOI, we pay out X amounts to workers, usually more frontline workers, as an incentive retention type bonus structure. I would love that.
So there are reasons why, financial reasons that Katie knows better than me, for why bonus structures can't be done by local governments. However, and I've said this to several people through the bargaining process, and I've not been in the room because they say I'm not supposed to be in the room because I'm the city manager, right? But the reality is that if our ending fund balances turned out to be better than we thought, if we could still achieve our CIP projects that we have to do and do the things that the residents expect from us, and our ending fund balances were higher than we had predicted, I promise you I would come back to council / the budget committee and ask for an extra point or more of COLA. And I'm looking at that. We're going to watch these ending fund balances. We now have a 3-year model, which we haven't had before. So, yes.
There's also a group of people who aren't covered by collective bargaining, and you instituted a change that allowed them to also get COLA increases, which many years they did not get because it wasn't in the budget. So I think it's been a vast improvement over the last couple of years in how this is handled, which is great. And I like the idea that you have going forward. Good.
I have one more. Reserve officers. Reserves don't get paid? Is that a law? Or what is-
Kind of.
Okay.
Yeah,
can
they
we
do not get
Can you
paid.
talk about that for a sec?
There was previous council for the city decided to go down the road that we wouldn't be paying our reserve officers. And so, because it's much like an insurance policy, how much liability do you want? The basically was they could be eligible for PERS and other reimbursements, although they weren't asking at all for any of that stuff. And probably could have had them sign an agreement, but the previous city attorney decided that that was not a risk worth taking. So they didn't get paid much. Working football games, those types of things, not auxiliary things like coming out. That would be a patrol function, so we couldn't pay someone less because there's an association. So anytime they came out, they would augment patrol, not take a patrol position. Did I explain that? Okay.
Sorry, I'm gonna go back to it. So if I understand correctly, someone will put in a uniform and help the police as a volunteer position, 100% not paid.
That is correct.
Thank you for your service, those of you who are out there.
I don't like it. I mean, I feel like I don't know, is that in line with other cities? When I heard this, I obviously thank you for your service and we need them. But like, what are other neighboring cities doing? Is this the industry standard to just not pay reserves? Can we fix this and start paying reserves?
Because of that ruling, a lot of other agencies around us, we weren't very popular, or depending on how you looked at it, we were very popular when that ruling was issued. And so a lot of departments don't have reserves anymore because of that. I will tell you, just to make sure I am 100% correct, the city does pick up an insurance plan, so they're covered for insurance if there's any kind of injury or any of that kind of stuff. The medical is taken care of, those types of things. There's no monetary value. Also, if they get involved in a very serious incident, possibly a life or death incident, the city does pay a small insurance fee, so they are represented. So that was something that I fought for when I became the interim chief. And because our sergeants didn't have that, because they were non-represented, I didn't have that, and our reserves didn't have that. So I think it's about $105 a quarter. So it's very nominal, it's very small fee and well worth it. So they would have representation if they were to act as a police officer on duty, not off duty.
And I'm gonna just ask one follow-up question. If you were to give me an estimate of a week, a regular week, how many hours do you have a reserve serve your department per week?
I would estimate that they put in enough time for 2 full-time police officers. And the difference is, it's not 2 full-time 40-hour-a-week police officers. It's throughout the weeks, it's throughout the months. And they'll work high school games so that full-time police officers are actually doing more of the, I guess, crime fighting, or, what professional police officers should be doing. And they augment the things that really the full-time officers would not necessarily want to do. And it also helps keep the costs. We provide security through these reserve officers to the high school, to George Fox, Tunes on Tuesday, those types of things. And then, so it keeps the cost down for the community. So really, they're just a bunch. There's 5 that give back to the community, and they have other probably higher paying jobs. And so it's just something that they feel compelled to do.
Thank you for adding that. I was going to ask, how many of those? So 5.
Yeah, that was my
Thank
question
you.
too.
I would love to have more, but as you can imagine, the pool for police officers just full-time is shrinking. So we're very fortunate and lucky to have a fully staffed department.
And I'm sure this is on everyone's mind, but liability wise, we only have this small policy so are we possibly sitting in this situation where we could?
We have a workers' compensation. They are covered under workers' compensation, and that's actually governed by an ordinance, I believe a council ordinance of how much their wages are counted. They would be covered by workers' compensation if they're injured. And what the chief is talking about is an accidental death and dismemberment policy. It's really small, but we do have it. We maintain it, and then the representation.
just to follow up, the representation is through PORAC, and that's a shared expense or representation through an attorney. So, you know, if they will supply an attorney and all the tools that they need to represent the reserve officer, the sergeants, and the administration.
I should also not give you a false impression. The workers' compensation would be, of course, based on wages, like all workers' compensation. And since it's nothing, or just estimated at $1,200 a year, it wouldn't be very helpful.
This is fundamentally a volunteer effort by some very good people. And it would be great if we could afford to pay all of our volunteers. But that doesn't always happen. So I understand your generosity and you're wanting them to be compensated, but I also really appreciate the fact that they volunteer and they don't expect to be compensated. I really do appreciate that.
I'm just trying to say, like, in other industries where, you know, that level of skill and training is required, you know, someone stepping in volunteering for my job is fine. But like, we would never say to a doctor, no, we don't, Molly. We don't let a doctor go perform a surgery and not pay
Yes,
them.
I went out overseas and I don't even have a license to practice in the US, but.
But
with-
in overseas, but in the United States
Oh,
is what I'm
sure.
saying. I mean, so I'm just trying to say, like, to me, this feels like, is there an opportunity over time to develop into a per diem type of strategy, staffing pool? That's how we view reserves instead of a voluntary program. I don't know. I feel like that's, I think it's crazy to not pay people.
So, I mean, to be honest, sometimes when we've tried to do recognition things, some of these guys don't even want to be put into the limelight. Like they're not seeking, you know, anything like that. But but I would say that certainly if the chief wanted us to revisit this policy and advocated for that shift, then we would certainly bring something back to you guys in a future budget cycle to add some other dollars and cents to it. But I'm kind of would wait for his lead on that, whether that's how the people felt.
Is there any history of this being a pathway for reserve officers converting into a full-time role? Like I'm thinking about it as a way for headcount to continue to be filled over time.
At one point, it was a massive pathway to being hired. And it was great because you could try someone on, so to speak, you know, before you made the full commitment. As you can imagine, you know, we're having a hard time finding reserve academies. We group up with Salem area and as well as McMinnville, Yamhill County and all that stuff. But it's hard to actually find, you know, your full-time. And then when you find someone that's a pretty good candidate for reserve, they're absolutely getting attacked with applications. So it is hard to, yes, and to answer your question, yes, but it's very difficult to get anybody through the Reserve Academy. If you don't already have a job and you've sort of said, hey, we'd like to hire you as soon as you get through this, they're getting applications thrown at them. So it is very difficult. But it used to be, at one point, for the city of Newburgh, about 85% of us used to be reserves first and got hired on.
Got it. Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to Fund 31, which is on page 41.
But before we continue to 31, does anybody need a break? A 5-10 minute break? Is everybody okay with that? So I'm looking at 7:20. Can we come back to it at 7:27? Well, a break that is an odd number is always good. So 7-minute break, everyone.
Hey, you didn't take
All
all
right.
notes, so.
So thank you everyone for your punctuality, 7:27, and we continue. Go on, Katie.
All right. So we'll start back up on Fund 31 for page 41, the resources. So like I kind of explained before, the Administrative Services Fund has resources that come from all of the other funds because these are our internal costs, so our internal departments. So we do a cost analysis based on the cost of each department, and we have other factors that go into that. And then we have the other funds and other departments all pay into this Administrative Services Fund. So that is where we get all of the revenues in here for this fund. And then if we scroll down a little bit for the first requirements here, we have insurance. So for insurance next year, we're expecting that to go up, unfortunately, but that's mostly because of the City Hall flooding. We're just expecting, since we're using our insurance, premiums always tend to go up because of that. So we're expecting that to have a little bit of an increase there. And then if you go to page 42, talking about the reserves we have on this fund. Oh, did you have a question?
Quick question, just.
Yeah.
PCL stands for?
Do you know what, Allison, do you know what the PCL stands for? On insurance? Oh, Mike knows.
Is it property, casualty and liability?
I think that is. There we go.
I'll take you after 10,000.
That's it.
This is like insurance Jeopardy.
Yeah.
Mike, how many years have you been waiting for that question to be asked?
I've waited 42 years and it's been a long time coming, I'll tell you.
So for the reserves here, so we zeroed out some of these, and that's just because we're not doing them this year. They're moving kind of to a different method here. So we have some rollover money here for facilities. And we're doing kind of a different thing now. So the last year money, we had that 540,000. We're starting a capital rollover fund for facilities, which we'll see when we get to the facilities budget. But from this current year budget, that's what they're anticipating to roll over from their facilities capital outlay money, that 175,000, which we're probably going to have to earmark for our city hall repairs, just because we don't know yet what's going to happen with that. The IT assigned for IT amount there, that is their capital rollover amounts that they have been saving for. And the one above it, the 36,000, is from admins. And that's all for that. You have a question?
And when each department talks, we'll hear about what that's for.
Yes. So for the next department, we have city attorney, and that's on page 44. The only change we had here, we had a little bit in the personnel, and that was mostly because our part-time prosecutor is now eligible for PERS here. So you'll see some extra costs there for retirement that's been calculated in. And then for the materials and services, the only change was our legal expenses, and that's where we budget our Miller Nash contract. So the contract amount went up a little bit this next year, so we've budgeted that increase in there to reflect that. And those are the only changes for this department. Do we have any questions?
There's a legal increase looks like about a 20% increase. Is that their fees going up, or is that we have more work for them to do?
It's mostly their fees. Their billable hours are going up based on their new contract rate. So we're expecting the same amount of work, but increased fees. Yeah, do you want to say something on that?
Usually in the evolution of a city, when it gets to a certain size, it goes back to bringing legal in-house. But that's typically when you get up to enough money to cover 4 different attorneys, each with a different speciality. So for now, Miller Nash is still the most cost-effective deal.
What is the tipping point in terms of population?
I think it's more like what is the tipping point in terms of legal fees? So if your legal fees get to be closer to $1 million, you should be thinking very hard about bringing that whole thing back in-house.
Yeah, and I think the offset too that I've seen for other cities is if they have an in-house attorney, it's very hard for that one attorney to be a specialist in all areas like bargaining and planning and all of those different legal aspects. So a lot of the time they have to bring in another expert attorney to help them. So you have their payroll costs plus their other expert attorneys that have to help them. So it's kind of, at what point is our contract outweighing our having an in-house specialist? Okay, we'll move on to the city manager.
Okay, so a couple of small changes in my budget request for this year. First of all, as you know, I have reduced the staffing slightly in the city manager's area. We had the need to use those staffing hours elsewhere, partly the effect of the courts and partly the effect of wanting to give some backup to our new city recorder. So I have done away with that because overall the objective was to restrain our budget expenses everywhere we could in order to not charge the residents more. So that was the course of that decision. The other big change that you'll see is that I had asked for a very large allocation the previous year to buy scanning equipment. Now, miraculously, the scanning equipment survived the flood. The table that really expensive scanner was on, and camera cradle and SLR camera, the water fell all around that table, and that equipment on that table, $20,000 of stuff, did not get wrecked. So that equipment is still good and it's saved. So in this budget request, you'll see that I've dropped the supplies and equipment number back down to $3,000. I would have dropped it down further, but I'm waiting to see whether there might be a few more bits and pieces I have to buy after the flood. I don't know what that might look like yet, but that was my thinking. The iPhone I use is still going strong after 4 years. I have no plans of upgrading it as long as it's still kicking. And what else is there? I think that's kind of the summary. Recognition. We're still able to squeeze the staff recognition party into that dollar amount. It's getting a little bit tougher to do that, but it's okay. We're good for next year, I reckon. Yeah. So I think that's about the end of my my report for the city manager's portion of the budget.
I have a question. For the budget committee, and I don't know where the budget for this budget committee comes from, food supplies, chocolate and all that. I was wondering is this from the city manager office? No?
It's in the city recorder's portion.
Coming up next. Okay, thank you.
So for all of the recognition, all recognition for the entire city of Newburgh staff would be the $7,500.
May I answer that?
There's another portion. There's another portion also that lives in HR. So that portion is for that once a year party where we celebrate all the awards and people's longevity. And I get my 5-year pin this year.
If you make it. He's gonna get his, just one.
I thought you meant you were going to fire me before July 1st.
No, they'd kill all of us if we fired you.
Are there plans in the future for an assistant for the city manager?
If the ending fund balance for the general fund proves to be better than predicted, and I will come back with a request to try to add an assistant in a future year. I have to make sure that We did, but then I got staff that needed extra help more than me. Because they've got kids. And I don't have kids. So I can work all the hours because they have to be with their kids. Because that's the most important time in a person's life.
I have a question, but do you also, because you can't do your job alone, right? So you don't have an assistant. Do other functions also help you in things where you need? I guess the point is, we want to make sure that, well, we understand that the priority is to make sure that your team is able to be with family, with kids, and have all of that. We too want to make sure that you have all the support that you need. And I guess my basic question is, do you have the support that you need to do your job?
We would prefer an honest answer.
We have a really great team of four of us that are like the admin team. So it's Will and myself, my assistant Melissa and Emily. Melissa actually does a lot of assistant work for Will as well. So she takes phone calls as needed. She does, researches this, prepares this document, whatever is needed. And so between the four of us, we check in every single morning. Where are you at? Red light, green light, yellow light. And we bounce projects off of each other. So we're a really good cohesive team, and we work very hard to support Will and make sure he takes breaks and things like that. He gets nagged by all of us all the time to take breaks. So right now, I feel that we've got a pretty cohesive team. I do think in the future, an assistant for Will would be wise, and I think he'll know when that point is.
It could increase his passion projects.
Yeah, and I'm saying this because we do see a really good decrease in the costs for you, and wage-wise, and we are all like, hey, that's great. But we also want to make sure that, and thank you, Rachel, for confirming that you are well supported to be able to do your job really well. So that's what I guess we all want for you.
I think I try to be respectful of the time of the other admin team members, but yes, we do have this procedure where every single day we tell each other what color we're at. And so if I'm red, they'll help me. But in the longer term, the city needs two things. The city needs a grant writer, and the city needs a position called a policy analyst 1. And we don't need them, I think, this cycle, but one of the positions in engineering is about to become a grant writer with the same FTE, because the city needs a grant writer. The policy analyst 1 type position, that can wait till another year. But as we grow, we're going to need that because it will enable us to write new code faster for legislative changes.
Thank you, Will. I think I speak for all of us that you're doing a great job.
All right, we'll move on to city recorder, which is on page 50.
Yeah, and because I'm running the pages you're seeing up there, I'm gonna give my little spiel from over here. So excuse me for that. I'm Rachel. If you haven't met me yet, I'm new as of August, so I'm eight months new still. And loving the work I get to do here. So just scrolling up to that. We just have a few minor changes this year. Let's see if I can do it from memory here. I have reduced my books and publications budget and moved that into my supply budget because there's more need for a broader supply category than there is for a specific books allocation. So there's $50 moved. I have asked for a slight decrease to travel and training. I've done a ton of onboarding new training this year. I won't need quite as much next year, but the 3,000 there will allow for training towards the certification I've been asked to get and some training for my assistant. And then we've asked for a slight increase in professional services budget. That's our most significant change. And that is because of transcription costs of our meetings. All of our meetings, we need to prepare minutes and prepare public records for, and that's a very expensive thing. However, with the addition of our new agenda and meeting management platform that I got at a revenue neutral cost this year, hopefully that line will be able to go down next year. because there are some other ways that we can create minutes that will save us time and money. So those are my big changes. I don't have anything else, right, Katie? No, that's it.
I have a question. Is it legally required to provide a transcription or just minutes?
So our transcriptionist does minutes. They don't do a verbatim transcription. When we post to our YouTube page, we create that closed captioning of the minutes. So we do two things to meet our legal requirement. We have a recording and a video of every meeting. So this is being recorded right now, if you didn't know. And we also provide minutes that are written. Those are more of an action minutes. They're pretty brief. We do that so that you can kind of figure out what recording you need to look at if you need more detail. But we want to capture the major actions that were taken, the votes, who did what. So we do both, but they are not a full-time thing. And we're looking at some new options for that. We've actually contracted with a new transcriptionist who is less than half the price of our last company, and is doing a fantastic job and happens to be a local person. So we're keeping the money in town. We are still in a contract with our past company that we just pay them per meeting as we send it to them. We'll keep them on board in case we need backup. But we're working on that. And then we're finding out ways, like I said, our new software, I was showing it off to Katie before this meeting. There's some neat ways to take minutes as you go that makes the workflow a lot easier. So I'm working on reducing that cost, but for next year, we still expect a little bit of an increase. If not, then there'll be a budget change mid-year and I'll say, Katie, take it away.
All right. We'll move on to community engagement, which is on page 52.
All right, good evening. My name is Emily Salisbury. I am the graphic design specialist for the city of Newburgh, and I'm in community engagement. I am the one FTE in community engagement, and I just went up to a full-time position this year. I was previously sort of 3/4 time. But just before we had a change in our city recorder, I went up to full-time just to be able to manage everything that I do. So we also, you'll notice on the budget here, we have a couple of line items that are $0. Those were all rolled into professional services last year, minus books and publications, because I don't really do many physical books and things like that. So everything got rolled into professional services. That budget line was increased last year so that we could get a new website, which is very expensive. And I managed to keep that pretty low cost for the city. So that did not break 30K. And so I decided for this year, we can cut that budget down a little bit, leave a little wiggle room because we're going to keep our previous vendor for one more year just to make sure we have plenty of time for that transition from the old site to the new one. And then, you know, any additional room as I settle into the position even more and see if there's any improvements that can be made to other softwares that I use. The capital outlay last year, the previous city recorder was over my position, and she added cell phones for us because I did not previously have one, despite being social media for the city. So that was great to add that to my position. I kept that for this year because I have some camera equipment upgrades in mind because I take a lot of photos for the city. A lot of the photos in this book were taken by me, and the book was designed by me.
That's right.
So, you know, I'd like to upgrade the equipment a little bit if I can this year, and camera lenses are expensive. So I think that's pretty much everything for me.
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
You do the LinkedIn
I do the LinkedIn, yes.
and the Instagram?
Yep, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and Nextdoor also.
Okay.
I have a question. Not to put you on the spot because it's just you in this department and you're standing right here, but So the 2022 budget, the salary was, I'm guessing 1.5 people.
Right, yeah. So
Was that-
2022, I was on, basically part-time with Ezekiel, who was
Uh-huh.
full-time. And then when he left, I think I stayed part-time for a little bit, and then I sort of went up to 3/4, and then I bumped up to full-time.
Okay.
So the
And I-
position has changed throughout the year, but
And I think in 2022, we still had, the previous person who was still there for part of the time.
Yes.
Lacey was still here.
yeah, Lacey was still here then.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just wondering. She's doing a lot with that. So is there a way of like, there has been a full market analysis on this role and position and what?
Just one comment that I think it's outside of the scope of the budget committee to discuss salaries of individual salaries in general. I think that's my understanding.
Okay, then I'll reframe the question. So have we done a market analysis on this department as a whole and the roles that are in them that we are in line with neighboring, like industry?
Yes, we have done, when we did our class and comp study, every single position was analyzed. And with the exception of a very few, everybody was above market rate. And those few that were not at market rate were raised up with some adjustments at that time.
Okay.
I just want to say police did not take part in the class and comp, just to be clear.
What?
Police officers were not part of the class and comp, just so
Okay.
that we're very clear.
Okay. And then the total one FTE we feel like is adequate for the amount of work. I see you everywhere, which is amazing.
I will also say I work for another local nonprofit too. And my work between the two, while I am careful not to overlap hours, they associate with each other. So I do spend a lot of time in the community as the community engagement person for the city. So, you know, I'm very cognizant of my personal time and when that is spent doing city work versus nonprofit work versus personal work.
Please. NDC employs her also, which is why you see her a lot around the community. So.
I'm just calling the question
Partnership.
if it's enough for the amount of growing endeavors we have as a city is one person enough?
So the thing is, right? I mean, Elise, I love you. But I have to put it like this. There are many places in the city where in an ideal world, I would add more staff. But I'm also trying to restrain the growth of rates and make sure that we try to put money aside for the water plant and other things, right? So across the board, I kind of have to do this balancing act between, but what I do every day is I check in with this amazing human being and make sure that she's not stressed out and that we're not at amber or red too many days in a row. And
I will also say to that, I have a couple of awesome collaborators in other departments, particularly police and library. They pretty much manage their own communications. So I'm mostly doing community engagement for everyone in City Hall, Public Works. So we have also a staff member in police who manages their social media and everything. And then a few people at the library, as I understand it, kind of tag team doing their website updates and social media. So, you know, I definitely think as I come into this role more fully, there's going to be more healthy collaboration between all of us to really help assist with that stuff. It's just, you know, we've had some chaos in the city that sort of messed with those plans a little bit. So, yeah.
Just ask for so webmaster, social media and newsletters and graphic design for the city, all those roles. Okay. That's a lot. Yeah.
Video editing. I edit our, all of the YouTube videos for meetings on the channel.
Everyone in the admin section carries the same sort of number of loads. Right? We're compared to other cities our size, yes, we're understaffed. But we're trying to do the right thing by the residents and make sure that we don't increase the rates, and we're doing the right thing by the people, which is who we're here to support.
It's called a lean operation, wearing many hats. So I'm thankful for that approach. And again, to piggyback on what Elise said, you know, keep that communication open to make sure that as the need grows, that you communicate with the team that, hey, you need help or and whatnot, because we want to make sure that you are also happy here in your role, well
definitely.
supported, able to do everything. Because I follow what you're doing. I think you're doing a great job.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I definitely have heard from a lot of people in a similar position to mine that the very common story is that it's a pretty much always a scrappy, small team of people that are multi-skilled and do a lot of things because they're really passionate about it. And I would say I'm no exception. So thank you.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to finance, which is on page, next one, 54.
Are you presenting on that?
That's right, I'll be
All right.
presenting on this one. Yeah. So for finance, we just had very minimal changes, just like everybody else. The two main changes for this were professional services. Actually, it's maintenance agreements, sorry. Maintenance agreements, we increased that to account for our new budgeting and forecasting software. We're gonna have annual fees for that going up. And then the offset for that was we decreased our capital outlay costs because we don't have to implement any more software. So it was sort of a wash between the two on the budgets. And then looking at general office, our postage, we had an increase there. We got notice from the post office. Postage is going up, I think 5 cents each stamp next year. And so we also run like a report off of our postage machine to see actual usages and cost analysis on that by department. So we've budgeted a little bit of an increase for next year just based on the increase in postage and our actual usage. And then same thing for the telephones. There's just a little bit of an increase there based on the contract costs that we have for our cell phones and our main phones throughout the city. And then for finance billing, this is for utility billing specifically. The bank fees, like I said, again, these had a pretty large increase, but in the supplemental budget this year, I did true up the budget there to be more in line with what we budgeted next year, because those are our actual fees that we're incurring are closer to the 280,000 for utility billing. And then the utility assistance increased based on the council resolution to increase the military assistance amount that we give out each year. And that's it for these ones. Do we have any questions? Molly?
A lot of utilities do online email billing. Do we have any thoughts about that? Requires no postage. That's the only reason I thought about it.
Oh, yeah, we do have a fair amount of customers that receive their bills online through email. It's just getting people to switch over to email. Lots of people still prefer the mail. But yeah,
I think I'd have to look. I think there'd be an option for you to go online and opt out of the postage. I know I received both. I have to look into that. So
yeah. It's a process.
maybe we can advertise that.
Yes, there you go. All right, we'll move on to human resources, which is on page 58.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Alison Seiler. I'm a part-time project specialist working out of class as the interim human resources manager, which should explain everything about the costs in the personnel services line item, but I can go into more detail on that if you would like. Sorry. I'll start off by highlighting some of the changes and then I can take any of your questions.
Can we go back into the wages? About last year, we had a manager.
Yes, do you want me to go into the
Yeah,
wages?
yeah.
Okay, well, Katie would prefer I start with the personnel. So there was a plan originally to have an HR manager in this position, and the city has gone through 4 recruitments to try and obtain that whilst I was working as a part-time after the last person left in 2020. January of 2020. We've been through 4 recruitments since then. I can tell you a little bit of why that doesn't work out. Traditionally, a person who manages somebody. And this city for a long time has only had 1 person in that role. And so when a city gets to 158 employees, you generally have, it's about 1 per 60 employees that you need in HR. So you usually have about 2.5 people for this city. So a manager is expecting to have the most of the routine work done by an HR generalist and not a part-time person working 20 hours a week, which is all this city has had long before I came here, actually. So we tried the recruitments and it hasn't really worked. So we changed tack in the middle of last year. And that's why you can see the higher amount scheduled to try and hire a manager. But then we decided that, or at least I recommended that probably the best way forward was to have a very robust generalist doing the full life cycle of HR, and then try later to hire a manager when you have somebody in place to do all the work throughout the HR cycle that they can really count off, and then they can turn their attention to higher things. And because I was a manager in my last job, I offered to mentor a generalist if we could bring someone on board, and we brought someone on board in September of last year. So that's why this line item is showing some lean years where it was more or less just me. And then we were planning to hire the manager. And now we have 1.5, 1 full person, and I work 28 hours a week. So
Allison, the reason the 23-24 budget amount is bigger for salaries is because we had targeted to hire a full-time manager,
Yes.
but it didn't happen. Okay,
and it
thank
didn't,
you.
and it did not happen.
Okay,
Yeah.
appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Onward to changes for this year.
I just want to say, I love your innovation. I think that is brilliant, especially in this situation, and we're so grateful.
Thank you. So the changes for this year. Let me start with staff recognition, which is something that Councillor Jan-Al Holloman asked about. So in the end of 2022, we did a staff survey. And I was really delighted that 111 of our staff participated out of 153 in that survey, which is a very high response rate. And we've been slowly working towards some of the things that the staff asked for, more 410 work, obviously the benefits section of that, they actually really high percentage of people said they understood the health benefits, which is very important. So we do try to do a lot of education and on staff benefits. But then came the part about wanting team building outside of that. So and opportunities to get together during the year to meet other departments. That's also very important. So this year, for the first time, I asked in a BCR that Will suggested that we have a staff recognition line item. You'll see it goes from zero, therefore, to $17,300. And that is made up of $100 for each staff person. 158 staff people, $15,800 and $2,500 is for having lunch and learns every 2 months, where we provide pizza and soft drinks. I was so shocked how much pizza costs, by the way. And so we have those, and staff come over and get together. But the $100 a person seemed the fairest way for all departments to know what they would have to spend. Bigger, smaller departments, everyone gets the same, everyone gets $100, and they can do a team building activity. So that's why that line item is there and hasn't been there before. You will see there is a $30,000 recruitment expense under the 2024 budget that we didn't actually use, and you'll see that has gone to nothing in this year. And that is because we have implemented the new Attract software. And if I could just take a minute to explain what that is to you, because I think it's a very important tool. What it does is it allows us to target specific job skills. And the 30,000 was supposed to be for higher, in case we had to go out to use a recruiting firm for higher level positions. So, for example, we knew that we were going to need a community development director. And instead of going externally to hire a community development director, I was able to target the skills that a community development director might have, the higher degrees, the various skill sets, the engineering requirements. And through that, what happens is you can target skills. So if I needed a person with a CDL license, I could go out and target a radius of 250, 500 miles for anyone who had a CDL. And what that allows me to do is interact with the applicant before they apply for the job. And that's what candidates really want to do these days. They want to ask you questions. What are the benefits like? What it's like to work at the city? And so instead of going to me, they are going to a portal that gives them information about the city, but it also allows them to send me messages and say, what's this like? How does that happen? And it allows me to have interactions with a potential applicant before they even apply for the job. And that costs $6,000 a year, which you will see has been added to the professional services line item, which is why that has gone up, because that is where our NeoGov platforms live, and Attract is in the NeoGov platform. So we didn't actually use the recruitment cost, and Scott was one of the first people actually to reach out through the Attract software and interact with the city. So it works, and I think it really is a good way of targeting staff. So the only other line item I might mention is the 4,000 in dues and meetings. And that is because we have hired the generalist, and I really believe in professional development. And so that person is aiming for their Society of Human Resource Management certified professional certification, as they should, and I would hope they do. And so I have asked for them to be able to go to the SHRM conference in 2025 and to do some professional training, because I really think that will serve the city very well. So that's all I have to say. If you have any questions. Oh.
No, thank you so much for that presentation. I think very creative ways that you found solutions for the agenda.
All right, we'll move on to IT, which is on page 60.
Hello, I am Brittany Jeffries. I am the IT Administrative Assistant. Our manager could not be here tonight, so I am going to grace you with my presence and little knowledge I have. All right, so one of the big significant changes, it looks like we will be adding a GIS tech to our team in fiscal year 25. And then one of the big changes that you're going to see is an increase in our maintenance agreements. This is the cost of doing business in IT. What we're seeing is there is a trend where a lot of our vendors are switching from a maintenance agreement set pricing to a subscription model, and that comes a little costly. For instance, one of our vendors went up a little over 200%. And that was going from an agreement, contract agreement, to that subscription model. So that is one example. And then last is our capital outlay. And what we have been doing, our previous manager has worked really hard for the last 3 years to get us in a proactive situation instead of being reactive. And with that said, hopefully in the next 1 to 5 years, we would like to purchase some of the following items. Hyper-V host servers, NetApp storage, Citrix host network, thin clients, phone systems, desk phones, phone system servers, Exchange servers, access control hardware, video surveillance storage, backup servers, replication servers, UPSs, and cameras.
And that all goes towards the contingency that we saw on page 42. So this capital outlay that they have on page 60, they're not going to spend all of that this next budget cycle, and they're going to plan to roll over some of that into that contingency to purchase some of these items in the future.
I think you have also a lot of the equipment that went bad in the flood, because I saw you moving it when I was there that day. The water in that fire system actually is highly corrosive to electric. Had no idea, but things were rusting like within 48 hours. So you may lose some of your capital outlay to replacing stuff, although insurance.
I just want to highlight that the GIS position, this new position, is not new. It's someone who was in engineering, but it would be more efficient for the city to have them provide the mapping and graphics GIS services to the rest of the city while seated in IT, because they'd be able to tweak the server settings better in ways I don't understand.
Just out of curiosity, and I don't know if you have the answer, you mentioned that one of the providers, one of the services that you guys have had an increase of 200%. And if you cannot disclose, that's fine, but what was it?
I believe I can say it was our ESET, one of our security antivirus.
Okay, yeah, okay, thank you.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move to facilities, which is on page 62.
Hi, I'm Preston Langlers. I'm the maintenance superintendent. I'll be covering facilities and fleets tonight. Real quick, Katie talked about the contingency on page 42 of 175K that we will be rolling over. Those funds were earmarked for some projects we had this year, but before we kicked off, City Hall happened. I worked with the chief, who the funds were kind of designated for this building, and we agreed that it would be best spent to hold it and use it for City Hall. To kind of strike when the iron's hot. Moving down, we were asked to keep our budget as close to what it was as last year. We were able to accomplish this pretty much all the way across the board, except for in utilities. We had increased by $20,000 as PG and Northwest Natural has increased. And they're also predicting another large increase in the following year. So we're just trying to keep up with those times. When I got here about almost 3 years ago, I was kind of tasked with trying to condense the budget and make it a clearer picture of what we are spending for each building and what it actually takes to maintain it. So you will see for Public Works Maintenance, City Hall, the library, that those funds have gradually increased. Part of this is we are developing programs to maintain some of these historical buildings and these old brick buildings. There's also a lot of situations where things break and fail, and we just have to replace it. One of the big expenses this year was a $10,000 water heater. So some of our stuff being commercial grade and requiring professionals to install are quite expensive. We are getting on a good pace with facilities to stay always in the positive. And with our 2 staff members that are highly talented, we are able to do a lot of work in-house and save the city as much money as we possibly can. You will also see in capital outlay that we have $540,000. This is part of the rollover program that we have started. Normally that you would have found that in contingencies, and those funds were earmarked for projects. It was also earmarked for HVAC replacements. This building has over 19 units on the roof. We have to replace 2 every year at about $36,000, and they increase about $4,000 a year for the cost of that. City Hall has units we just replaced the year before, and we have close to 50 units throughout the whole city. So that is a huge expense. Some of this is for some other projects and improvements, furniture replacements, and so forth. Is there any questions?
So the HVAC units that you are replacing, what is the life expectancy of them? Do they run like a normal life expectancy of a house, or is it a lot shorter because they're maybe a heavier load or something?
Their lifespan is about 20 years is what we are predicting. So we're trying to build a replacement schedule that we hope to propose next budget cycle, so that you will see all of our equipment, backup generators and everything on replacement schedules. And so that we're saving up, so we don't have like City Hall where we have $350,000 to $400,000 expense come up for HVAC. Some of the units on this building are 25 years old. They're ticking time bombs.
You had a janitorial service, 98,000, it's gone to 0.
Yes, so one of the things is condensing maintenance agreements covers a lot of our contractual services. So as far as janitorial, shampooing, or some of our cartograph expenses, and HVAC maintenance contract that we have. So a lot of those expenses we're just kind of putting in there.
Listen, I know you covered this briefly. When I was going through the budget on the bottom of page 62, the last 6 lines, they've all increased significantly over the previous year. In fact, well, not doubled all of them. So these are for units, various.
So these funds actually are not for like HVAC units. These are for, right now it's being used for a hot water heater that just blows up on us, and we got to do. There's other general maintenance. Brick needs to be pressure washed and sealed every so often. Grout on the buildings need to be regrouted. We have window seals and concrete chunks falling off of the library window seals we got to replace. We have fogging and discoloration in windows, so we're gonna have to replace those seals. Storefront windows isn't an install when you're done. They have elastic seals that need to be replaced every so often. So it's these general maintenance things that need to be done, but we just haven't had the ability till we've gotten Cartograph to start tracking some of these expenses, building a more robust program so we can track all these funds and expenses and have a better idea of what it takes to maintain a historical building.
Katie, if I might, just to back up on that a little bit too, prior to the 2022 budget year that's shown in the book, we had basically a pool of money that was listed under facilities that we dipped into for each individual facilities. And part of the task that Preston's moved forward with is capturing the actual costs of the individual facilities, the public safety building, the library, city hall, for the maintenance and care of those facilities, rather than having a giant pool that we were trying to figure out, okay, how much does city hall actually cost? So he's done a very good job, and that's what this is reflecting here.
All right. One minute, please.
Okay.
Page 66.
So in fleet, for the materials and services, we were able to hold the line. There's very minimal, expense increases. The fuel, we don't need to increase. What that is, it's a rolling over fund. So we use that to refill the tank. And then I put out a bill that we charge out of the different departments, the school district, and anybody else who fuels up at our facility. We charge them a little bit extra because we have 2 oil separators that we have to get cleaned and serviced about twice a year from diesel spills and so forth that happen in the yard. You will see in capital outlay, it's part of the savings program that we're starting to set the foundation for the fleet replacement program. The general fund, all the vehicles that will be replaced for the general fund will lie in this one. In the next few years, we're going to show a plan of savings to hopefully reduce the cost of replacing vehicles over a lifespan of a fleet. All right.
Cool.
Thank you.
I should mention that the fuel tank thing that Preston mentioned was also part of that cool deal with the school district that is bringing this $250,000 revenue per year into the system.
Did we have any other questions on Fund 31 before we moved on? All right. So we'll move on to the debt service fund, which is on page 137. $137. Oh. There we go. So the debt service fund covers some of our debt that we have. Some of our other debt lives in our utility funds, our water, our wastewater, and our SDC funds. This fund in particular covers the pension bonds that we have. We have let me look back here. The bypass loan, and then we have the communication tower debt are the 3 debts that are paid out of here. So for the revenue, we get a small amount of taxes every year into this fund just because of the debt service that we levy for this. The federal exchange grant. So for our bypass loan, we always exchange part of our federal grant money that we get for the roads fund so that we can pay for the bypass loan. And so you can see that reflected here. The pension bond charge is an internal charge that we charge ourselves to pay for the debt service. And that's just a cost allocation we do off of our payroll costs. And then the transfer in from the general fund is money that we get to pay for the communication tower debt that's funded from the general fund. And then if you look at page 138, we have the principal and interest on here. And these are all based on our amortization schedules of what we owe on these. The pension bond will be expiring in fiscal year 27-28. The bypass loan is like another 37 years or something, so that's a long time. And then the communication tower debt is the one that we are trying to pay off early for the debt reduction plan. We have any questions on these? All right. And then the last one for tonight is the Library Gift Memorial and Grant Fund, which is on page 139.
Hello again. So this one is brief as well. The grants and gift funds are for specific library projects, and the accounts are funded largely by the Newburgh Library Foundation, which funds our programs for all ages. The Newburgh Library Friends, which are funding end panels for the library this year, and the Ready to Read grant, which is funded through the State Library of Oregon. I would say the big change for this one is that last year, the Library Friends were funding the repairs of the original windows and doors from the Carnegie Library. And that actually was something that they funded directly. So you'll see that last year, I believe I was at 0 for that fund. So this year, the funds are again coming to the library, and then it will be funding another library-specific project. So, any questions for me about those? Thank you.
All right. So that's all we were scheduled to get through tonight. Next week, we have on the agenda all of our public works funds. So that's going to be our capital projects fund. So that's going to be Fund 4 and Fund 18. And then our regular utility funds. So the street fund, the water fund, the wastewater fund, and the stormwater. And then our SDC funds as well.
Madam Chairman?
Any further comments? Go ahead.
I would like to address the fine gentleman sitting back here in the back of the room. As our chairman pointed out earlier in one context, it's not appropriate for this board or the city council for that matter to try to advocate for more or less wages for our employees. That is the job of our city manager. That being said, you guys deserve every bit of praise that you heard put on any of these people up here today. The work that your crew is doing in this city is phenomenal, and we appreciate every bit of it. I hope that you can come to a reasonable solution with the city manager in your negotiation. I wish you luck. But in any case, I definitely appreciate the work, the hard work that you guys do. You're the ones out there getting wet when it rains, and it does not go unnoticed in this city. So thank you very much. And thanks for coming tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the fine words. With that said, if no other comments, I will call this meeting adjourned. And I'll add here, contact the city recorder office for physical or language accommodation at least 2 business before meeting. Call 503-537-1283 or email city recorder@newburghoregon.gov for TTY services, and please dial 711. Our next meeting is, May 7th and then May 14th. So I guess now I will call the meeting adjourned.